The rain fell softly against the towering windows of the luxurious penthouse, where Ethan Miller, one of the city's youngest and most admired CEOs, stood in silence. From the outside, he had everything anyone could dream of: money, power, and the kind of luxury that could turn heads wherever he went. But behind the immaculate suits and million-dollar deals, Ethan carried a wound so deep it had shaped every choice he made. Tonight, as he looked out at the glowing skyline, his thoughts were not on his upcoming wedding to Isabel, the elegant woman everyone called his perfect match, but on someone from a distant past, someone who still haunted his dreams. Her name was Claire. Years ago, before Ethan became a millionaire, before the endless chase for riches and success, there had been a different version of him, a man who loved without conditions and who believed love alone could conquer everything. Claire had been the center of that world. She was the quiet storm in his life, the girl with sun-kissed hair and a smile that could melt the hardest days. But life, with its cruel twists, had separated them, leaving him to bury those feelings under a mountain of ambition. He thought he had moved on until the day he saw her again. Ethan's wedding was planned to be the event of the year. Isabel's family, old money and untouchable influence had spared no expense. It was to be a marriage that would merge two powerful empires, a match that was as strategic as it was glamorous. Isabel was beautiful, flawless even. But Ethan knew that love wasn't the foundation of their union. It was expectation, business, and the pressure to maintain a certain image. And maybe, just maybe, a part of him hoped to feel something genuine again by bringing someone who once knew the real him. That's why one rainy afternoon, Ethan made a decision that would set everything on fire. He would invite Claire, the woman who had once been his everything, to stand as the godmother of his wedding. Not a bridesmaid, not a guest, but the one who would stand closest to him and his future bride. He told himself it was out of respect, out of gratitude for what they had shared. But deep down, he knew there was more to it, something he wasn't ready to admit. When Isabel heard the name Claire for the first time, a faint shadow crossed her face. She had heard whispers, fragments of a story that involved her fiancé and this mysterious woman. But she had never asked too many questions. Isabel was used to winning, used to being the one who had the upper hand in any room she entered. Yet, something about Claire's name planted a seed of unease in her heart. She didn't like the way Ethan's voice softened when he spoke of her, nor the distant look in his eyes that seemed to belong to another time, another world. But Isabel was no ordinary woman. She was sharp, calculating, and fiercely protective of the image she had built. Her life had been shaped by wealth and control, and no one, certainly not some woman from Ethan's past, was going to shake that foundation. Still, she kept her concerns hidden behind a flawless smile, waiting for the right moment to uncover the truth. The day Ethan finally sent Claire the invitation, his hands trembled. He had written and rewritten the message countless times. The words felt strange, almost like a confession. When Claire replied, her answer was simple: "If this is what you truly want, I will be there." But something in her tone, something unspoken, stirred old feelings he thought were long gone. Claire had moved on, or so he believed. She wasn't the girl from the small apartment with dreams bigger than both of them. She was a woman now, carrying her own scars, her own secrets. Ethan didn't know that by inviting her. He wasn't just opening the door to his past. He was also inviting a truth that could destroy the carefully constructed life he was about to step into. As the wedding day drew closer, Isabel started noticing the change in Ethan. He was quieter, more distant. She told herself it was stress, the weight of the ceremony, the business deals waiting on his desk. But a part of her, the part that had always been able to read people's hearts, sensed something else, a shadow of doubt, of longing. And when she finally saw the name Claire written on the guest list, a chill ran down her spine. She needed to know who this woman was. What history did they share that could make Ethan risk everything, even the image of perfection they were about to display to the world? And why did her instincts tell her that inviting Claire would be the turning point of everything they had built? The night before the rehearsal dinner, Isabel made a decision. She would find Claire. She needed to see for herself the woman who once held Ethan's heart. the woman who could still make him look like a man, torn between the life he had and the life he lost. But Isabel had no idea that what she would discover was far worse than she imagined. And Claire, too, wasn't coming to the wedding with empty hands. She carried something, a truth buried for years, that could change everything. Would Ethan's world collapse under the weight of the past he had tried so hard to forget? Or was there still time to rewrite the ending of a story that had never truly ended? The answer would come sooner than any of them expected. The night air was heavy with anticipation as the rehearsal dinner approached, the kind of evening where every detail was meant to shine like polished crystal. But inside Ethan's chest, there was nothing but a storm. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the half-written speech he was supposed to deliver tomorrow. The words were empty, rehearsed, lifeless, just like the version of himself he had been forced to become. Once, life had felt simple, full of dreams and untamed hope. But somewhere between building his empire and chasing riches, he had left behind the most genuine part of himself, the part that had known how to truly love. Claire's reply to his invitation replayed in his mind like an echo. He imagined her stepping into that elegant hall, surrounded by luxury and people who had no idea of the struggles he had faced to climb to the top. Would she recognize him, or had the millionaire CEO become unrecognizable from the man she once loved? He didn't know. All he knew was that seeing her name again had ignited something inside him, something both terrifying and liberating. Meanwhile, Claire stared at the invitation on her table, the thick, gold-embossed card that looked more like a symbol of another world than a simple request to attend a wedding. She hadn't seen Ethan in years. Their breakup had been abrupt, painful, like a glass shattering without warning. She remembered the night he walked away, not because he didn't love her, but because he had chosen ambition over them. He had promised to return when he had made it. But life had a way of rewriting promises, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her heart alone. Claire wasn't the same woman anymore. The young girl with big dreams had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew what rejection felt like. She had built her own life not with money or luxury, but with resilience. Accepting the invitation wasn't about rekindling old feelings, it was about closure, or at least that's what she told herself. But deep down there was something else, a secret she had kept all these years, a secret that could turn Ethan's world upside down if it ever came to light. Isabel, on the other hand, was not a woman who trusted easily. Her upbringing had been surrounded by whispers, lies, and polished appearances. She believed that love was a luxury few could afford, and that power was the only true protection. That's why she had chosen Ethan, not for who he was, but for what they could become together. She thought she had every detail of his life under control, every shadow cleared away. But now this woman from his past had surfaced, and Isabel felt an invisible thread pulling her toward a truth she might not want to uncover. The night she decided to find Claire, Isabel disguised her intentions behind a sweet smile and polite words. She asked Ethan casually about her, watching his reaction carefully. His voice softened, almost imperceptibly, when he said her name. It was the first time Isabel felt like she was standing on shaky ground. That softness, it wasn't businesslike, it wasn't calculated, it was real. Jealousy wasn't something Isabel often allowed herself to feel. She was too proud for that. But now, as she sat alone in her car outside Claire's small art studio on the other side of town, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: vulnerability. She watched the warm light spilling from the windows, the faint hum of laughter drifting out, as Claire worked with a group of children, teaching them to paint. There was nothing flashy about her, no diamonds, no designer gowns. And yet, something about her presence was powerful, magnetic. Isabel hated to admit it, but she could see why Ethan had once loved her. Still, Isabel wasn't ready to confront her directly. She wanted to observe, to understand. But what she didn't realize was that Claire had already noticed her. Later that night, Ethan received a message from Claire. Just one line: "Are you sure this wedding is what you really want?" The words hit him like a blow. What did she mean? Did she know something he didn't? Was she questioning his love for Isabel, or reminding him of the love they had lost? He wanted to call her, to demand answers, but something held him back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the realization that a part of him wasn't sure about anything anymore. And as the wedding day crept closer, the tension between the three of them grew like an invisible storm ready to break. Claire had a truth to reveal. Isabel had questions she couldn't silence, and Ethan, he stood in the middle of it all, torn between the life he had built and the life he once dreamed of. Something was coming, something none of them were prepared for. The rehearsal dinner arrived like a scene out of a dream, but for Ethan, it felt more like a carefully orchestrated illusion. The chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, the tables gleamed with silver and crystal, and the hum of polite conversation filled the air. Isabel stood at his side, radiating elegance in a fitted gown that screamed perfection. Yet, as she laughed with her guests, her mind was elsewhere, still haunted by the name Claire and the lingering doubt that gnawed at her heart. Ethan's eyes kept drifting toward the door. Every time it opened, his breath caught. When Claire finally walked in, time seemed to slow. She didn't wear luxury, nor did she need it. Her beauty was simple, understated, yet it carried a strength that no amount of money could buy. Her presence was like a quiet storm, calm on the surface, but with a force that could shake the room. Isabel noticed the way Ethan's expression shifted when he saw her. It wasn't dramatic, but it was there. A softness, a familiarity that no groom should have when looking at another woman, especially not on the eve of his wedding. Isabel smiled politely, masking the fire that began to burn in her chest. She had spent years building a life where no one could make her feel small. She wasn't about to let Claire undo that. Claire approached them with grace, her eyes meeting Ethan's for the first time in years. For a moment, the noise of the room faded, and it was just the two of them standing on the invisible bridge of memories they had tried to burn but could never quite destroy. Isabel extended her hand, her smile sharp as glass. "So, you're Claire," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Yes," Claire replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "And you must be Isabel. Congratulations." The tension between the two women was palpable, though no one else seemed to notice. Claire was polite, but she wasn't intimidated. Isabel, on the other hand, couldn't stop studying her. Every glance, every subtle exchange between her and Ethan. She sensed something buried beneath the surface, and it frightened her more than she wanted to admit. As the evening progressed, Ethan tried to focus on his guests, but his mind was unraveling. He caught fragments of conversations with Claire, moments where their eyes met, and 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. There was a question lingering in her gaze, one that he didn't have the courage to answer. Later that night, when the guests had left and Isabel was busy with final wedding preparations, Ethan found himself stepping out into the cool night air, desperate for clarity. He walked through the quiet streets, his mind spinning. He remembered the promise he had once made to Claire, to build a life for them, to give her everything she deserved. But when success came, it came with chains. He had traded dreams for obligations, love for power, and he didn't know if he could ever untangle the two. Claire, meanwhile, returned to her small apartment. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself as if searching for answers. Seeing Ethan again had stirred emotions she thought were buried forever. She wasn't here to ruin his wedding, but she couldn't ignore the truth she carried. There was something Ethan needed to know, something that could change everything. Yet part of her feared it would destroy him. Isabel wasn't sleeping either. She sat by her vanity, her fingers tracing the diamond necklace Ethan had given her. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like love. It felt like a transaction, a symbol of the life she had chosen, a life built on appearances. And now, for the first time, she wondered if she had ever truly known the man she was about to marry. The night before the wedding, all three of them were awake, lost in their own thoughts, their own battles. None of them knew that the morning would bring a storm of revelations that would shake their worlds. And when Claire decided to speak the truth, nothing would ever be the same again. The wedding morning dawned with a sky as pale as porcelain, the kind of quiet that feels deceptive, like the world is holding its breath before a storm. Isabel awoke early, her heart restless despite the luxury surrounding her. The bridal suite was filled with white roses, silk curtains, and the faint sound of classical music playing softly in the background. It should have felt perfect, yet perfection felt empty today. As her makeup artist worked on her, Isabel's mind was elsewhere, on Claire, on the unspoken tension that had lingered since the rehearsal dinner. Down the hall, Ethan sat alone in his dressing room, staring at the reflection of the man he had become. His tailored tuxedo was flawless, his cufflinks worth more than some people's yearly salary, but none of it brought him peace. He tried to picture his future with Isabel. Grand homes, luxury vacations, money flowing endlessly, business empires expanding. Yet, for some reason, that vision felt hollow. The thought of Claire being in the same building, holding secrets he might not be ready to hear, gnawed at him like a shadow he couldn't escape. Claire arrived quietly, wearing a simple but elegant dress that contrasted sharply with the glittering excess around her. She looked like she didn't belong, yet everyone turned to look when she entered. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that had nothing to do with riches or status. Isabel watched her from a distance, forcing a polite smile as she greeted guests. But deep inside, jealousy burned like fire. As the ceremony drew closer, Isabel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Ethan's distant gaze during breakfast, the way his voice softened when he spoke of an old friend, it all unsettled her. She decided she needed answers before walking down that aisle. So while the guests were being seated, and Ethan was preparing with his groomsmen, Isabel slipped away to find Claire. She found her in the garden, standing by a fountain, lost in thought. "You must be proud of yourself," Isabel said, her voice calm but sharp like a blade hidden behind velvet. "Being here so close to him on our day." Claire turned, her expression unreadable. "I'm not here to interfere, Isabel. I came because he asked me. That's all." "Really?" Isabel crossed her arms, tilting her head. "Because I see the way he looks at you. It's not the way a man looks at a guest, it's something else. And I don't like it." Claire sighed, her heart heavy. "Ethan is your fiancé, Isabel. If you feel threatened by me, maybe you should ask him why." The words stung like a slap. Isabel wasn't used to anyone challenging her, but Claire's calm confidence unsettled her more than anger would have. For a moment, Isabel considered lashing out, demanding answers, but something in Claire's eyes stopped her. There was no malice there, only truth. "Who are you to him?" Isabel asked finally, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. Claire hesitated. There were 1,000 things she could say. That she had been his first real love. That she had seen the man beneath all the wealth and ambition. But none of those words seemed right. So she said the only thing that mattered: "I was someone who believed in him before the world knew his name." Isabel's breath caught. There was pain in those words, but also a kind of grace. She turned to leave, her mind spiraling. For the first time, she questioned not just Ethan's feelings, but her own reasons for being here. Back inside, Ethan was pacing. The ceremony was minutes away, but he felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. When Isabel returned, her face pale, she didn't speak. She simply took her bouquet and prepared to walk down the aisle. But as the music began, her heart pounded with a question she couldn't silence. Did Ethan truly love her, or was she just part of the life he thought he needed? And Claire, she stood quietly near the altar, holding a secret that could tear everything apart if spoken. She didn't know whether to stay silent or tell Ethan the truth before it was too late. The ceremony began with all the grandeur one would expect from a wedding between a millionaire CEO and a woman from one of the most influential families in the country. The cathedral was adorned with towering arrangements of white lilies and roses, golden candle holders flickered with warm light, and a string quartet played softly as guests whispered in admiration of the luxury on display. But inside Ethan's chest, there was nothing but chaos. He stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for Isabel. The guests saw a man composed and dignified, but inside he was questioning everything. As Claire walked to her place near the front, her presence felt like a weight pressing against his heart. She was both a reminder of the man he used to be and the life he had once dreamed of. A life built on love, not on status or power. The doors opened and Isabel appeared, stunning in her gown. The guests gasped at her beauty, and she walked gracefully down the aisle. But Ethan couldn't help noticing the stiffness in her smile, the way her eyes avoided his. Something in her had shifted since she'd spoken to Claire, and he knew, deep down, that she felt the same doubt that was eating him alive. As the priest began to speak, Ethan's thoughts drifted. His mind replayed the moments he had spent with Claire all those years ago. Long walks in the rain, laughter over cheap coffee, dreams whispered late at night when they had nothing but each other. It was a kind of love that money could never buy, and one that he hadn't felt in years. Claire, too, couldn't ignore the tension. Watching Ethan and Isabel exchange glances felt like watching a story unfold where something was missing, something unspoken. She clenched her hands together, debating whether to speak up. But now wasn't the moment, or was it? When the priest asked if anyone had any reason why the couple should not be wed, the room went silent. Isabel's heart skipped a beat. She looked briefly at Claire as if expecting her to stand up, to claim something that hadn't been said yet. Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze flickering toward Claire just for an instant. It was enough for Isabel to notice. After the vows began, Ethan's voice trembled. It wasn't just the nerves. It was the feeling that he was about to make a promise with his lips that his heart might not fully keep. He looked into Isabel's eyes and saw a reflection of his own doubt staring back at him. Isabel's hand trembled slightly as she held his. She was beginning to realize that this wedding wasn't about love. It was about appearances, money, power, and expectations. And for a moment, a quiet voice in her mind asked, "Is this truly what you want?" Before she could process the thought, the ceremony continued. Guests smiled, cameras flashed, and everything looked perfect on the outside. But inside, Ethan was unraveling. He had built an empire on calculated decisions, but now, standing in front of everyone, he felt like a man who didn't even know his own heart. And then, just as the priest was about to declare them husband and wife, Claire's voice cut through the silence. "Ethan," she said softly, but with enough weight that the entire room turned to look at her. Isabel froze, her heart pounding. Ethan's breath stopped. Claire took a step forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and courage. "There's something you need to know before you take this step," she said. The room erupted in whispers. Isabel's face turned pale, her grip tightening on the bouquet. Ethan looked at Claire, torn between fear and relief. "Not here," Isabel whispered sharply, but Claire shook her head. "Now," Claire said, her voice firm but trembling with emotion. Ethan's world tilted. What was she about to say? What secret had she carried all these years? The room fell into an uneasy silence, every guest holding their breath as Claire's words hung in the air. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He had imagined many outcomes for this day, but nothing like this. Isabel's gaze cut through him like a blade, filled with both anger and fear. Claire took another step forward, her voice trembling but steady enough for everyone to hear. "Ethan," she said softly, "before you take these vows, you deserve to know the truth about why I came here today." Time seemed to stop. Ethan's eyes met hers, and in that moment, the memories came flooding back. Nights under the stars when they dreamed of a future that was never meant to be, promises made before the world tore them apart. He didn't know whether to run, to listen, or to beg her to stay silent. "Years ago when you left," Claire continued, "I never told you. I was pregnant. I raised our child alone without your help, without your name. And I never asked for anything, because I knew the life you chose was bigger than me. But I thought you should know the truth before you make a promise that cannot be undone." A collective gasp swept through the guests. Isabel's face turned ashen, her hands trembling around her bouquet. Ethan's knees weakened, and he had to steady himself against the altar. Every wall he had built to protect himself, every layer of pride and ambition, crumbled in an instant. He looked at Claire, stunned. "Our child?" His voice cracked under the weight of the words. Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "A little girl. She's 5 now. She has your smile, Ethan." The revelation hit like a tidal wave, not just for Ethan, but for everyone present. Isabel's world shattered. It wasn't just jealousy anymore, it was betrayal, confusion, and a deep wound to her pride. She stepped back, her eyes burning with questions she couldn't even form. Ethan's mind raced. For years he had been chasing success, thinking he was building a life worth living. But now he realized he had missed the most important thing of all: love, family, the kind of life that no amount of money or luxury could replace. He turned to Claire, his voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were gone," she whispered. "You chose a life without me. I didn't want to hold you back or make you feel obligated. I wanted you to find your own way. But now, seeing you here, about to marry someone you don't truly love, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Isabel, unable to hold back, finally spoke. "Is this true, Ethan? Did you ever love me? Or was this just a business deal?" Her words cut deep, and Ethan struggled to answer. He loved Isabel in his own way, but not with the kind of love that made a man give up everything. That kind of love belonged to Claire, and he knew it. Life has a way of revealing the truth at the exact moment we need to face it, even when it hurts. Sometimes we chase things that the world calls success, money, status, luxury, while forgetting what truly matters. The Bible reminds us of this in Matthew 6:21, where Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Ethan had placed his treasure in the wrong place, and now his heart was being tested. Another verse comes to mind, 1 Corinthians 13:4-7, which says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. Love never fails." In the end, it is not riches or titles that define us, but the love we give and receive. Ethan stood there realizing that he had been given a second chance to choose what truly matters, a chance to choose love, forgiveness, and truth over a life of empty appearances. The cathedral, once filled with whispers and tension, now felt like the center of a storm, but a storm that carried clarity. Ethan's eyes, wet with tears he hadn't shed in years, moved between Isabel and Claire. The world seemed to demand a decision, one that would define not just his future but his very soul. Isabel, still trembling, took a deep breath. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking but firm, "I need to know right now, are you marrying me because you love me, or because this life looks perfect on paper?" Her words sliced through the silence, laying bare the question that had lingered unspoken all along. Ethan couldn't answer right away. He looked at Claire, the woman who had known his heart before the money, before the empire. And he thought of the little girl he had never met, a piece of him he hadn't known existed. For the first time, the image of his future wasn't filled with skyscrapers and boardrooms. It was filled with laughter, with love, with something real. "I can't marry you, Isabel," he said finally, his voice heavy but resolute. "Not because you're not extraordinary, you are, but because my heart isn't fully here, and you deserve someone whose love is complete, not divided." Gasps filled the room, but Isabel simply stood still, tears slipping down her face. There was anger, yes, but also a strange sense of relief. Deep down, she had known this day wasn't built on love. It was built on appearances. Without a word, she handed Ethan the ring, turned gracefully, and walked down the aisle, her dignity intact. Ethan turned to Claire, his heart pounding. "I don't know how to fix the past," he said, his voice breaking. "But if there's still a part of you that can forgive me, I want to try. I want to know my daughter. I want to start over. Not as the man the world expects me to be, but as the man I should have been for you all along." Claire's eyes softened, tears streaming as she whispered, "Ethan, we can't erase the past. But maybe we can build something better now. Something real." In that moment, the weight of years lifted. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was honest. Ethan walked out of the cathedral, not as the millionaire CEO everyone admired, but as a man who had finally chosen love over luxury, truth over appearances. For the first time in years, he felt alive. As the sun began to set, Claire took his hand. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said with a smile. And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a life where his riches meant nothing compared to the sound of his daughter's laughter or the warmth of Claire's hand in his. Life is too short to live for appearances or empty achievements. True happiness is built on love, forgiveness, and the courage to choose what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, give a like, and watch the next video on the screen. It might be the reminder you need today.